Hi, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. Here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to eLearnChat. I'm Rick Zanotti, and today we are going to have a great show. Well, we try to have great shows. Anyway, right over here next to me, just a scant several thousand miles away in the hinterlands of cold, there is our Dawn Mahoney. Hey, Dawn, how are you?
Hi, happy to talk with you today, and I'm so excited about our guest being here.
Yeah, this is a good shot. And we've got with us, would you like to introduce our guest?
I'd love to. So, 2 years ago, when I went to my first presentation summit, I met Mike Parkinson and his lovely wife, Jennifer. And I think we hit it off friendship wise, and we reconnected at this past year's presentation summit. And it's taken us a year to get here, but he's on the show today. Hi, Mike.
How you doing?
Hey, Mike.
Good, good,
Hello.
good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. Not as well as Rick in California, but I'm doing well.
Hey, by the way, for you guys that are in the cold, we are going to be 88 today,
Wow.
which for us is hot.
But who was whining a week or so ago when it was cold out there?
Oh, I like it cold.
Anybody? Yeah, you do. You do. I lost Justin TV, so I'm fiddling with my computer here, but never mind. Never mind. So, Mike, tell us all about Get My Graphic and your book and how you started your business. I'm fascinated with all of it.
Well, I got to tell you, I stumbled upon this. I found out that I was very, very interested in graphics. Early on, I went to school, Baltimore School for the Arts, learned fine art. Realized, it wasn't quite for me. Then I stumbled upon science, specifically behavioral psychology, and thought, wow, this is amazing. Well, I married the two and came up with, or at least dove into visual communication, which I love. Because the more that we learn, the more I understand the power of visual communication in learning, education, of course, even selling and so forth. Communicating in general is benefited by visual communication. So I took what I learned, I took what really smart people, not me, have shared through independent research and created a book called $1 Billion Graphics. Now, of course, it's focused on people trying to sell ideas and information and solutions, but it's completely applicable, and it's completely applicable to just about every industry, because the process for visualizing, the process for concepting is the same no matter where we are or what we do. Then I came up with, that helps us go from an idea or words and turn it into a visual representation, a sketch, a concept. But then I found that non-designers and designers alike struggled with the resources to render a graphic. So I created something called Get My Graphic, and me and my team, what we do is we create graphics that we frequently use for our clients. And our clients range from small companies, small organizations, nonprofits, all the way up to the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And we take those graphics that we know work for them, and we make them available for everyone to download or search, download, and then edit in PowerPoint and then import into any software that they want. So essentially, it's a tool that empowers us to actually make the graphics ourselves without a lot of time and money.
Can I just say how fabulous some of them are? If you have graphs that you need to show or charts, they're already out there for you to use and just edit in PowerPoint. You just purchase them as is, and there's some really stunning looking items right on his homepage. How do you get to your designs?
You would simply go to getmygraphic.com, and there are free examples on the first page. Download them, have fun, sign up for free, and then if you decide to get them, just like most stock image or royalty-free image websites, it's credit-based, or you can get an unlimited subscription, which results in the graphics costing a couple pennies or something like that. So it's very, very cost-effective, saves a ton of time.
Absolutely. And he's a bundle of energy. I think, how are you like staying so contained here? Normally when I see you, you're very, very active.
Well, I don't want to jump around because this is one of the few Skype interviews I've done, and I don't want to do anything to mess up what Rick's doing. I don't want to jump off the screen
No,
or
you're doing
something
great.
like that. So I'm trying to be, but if you're giving me permission, I'll certainly amp it up a notch. I'm ready. I'm just kind of buzzing inside right now.
Holding it in. You're holding it in.
I am trying to. I don't want to do anything wrong.
Now you're doing fine.
Good.
I'm restarting my computer at this end. Just thought I'd catch you up, everybody. So what else would you like to tell us about this industry? And I love the fact that it's translatable for across platforms, across industries. It's not just for e-learning designers. It's not just for marketing. It has an application for both. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Visual communication helps in every industry. Why? Because visual communication, what we see, trumps almost every other sense. For example, if I said, don't move, whatever you do, don't move, and there was a car speeding toward you, would you move? Of course you would. What we see is very powerful because typically, or I should say always, what we see can hurt us more than what we would hear. So therefore, seeing is going to trump almost every other sense in learning, in education, of course, in communication for sales purposes, in marketing design, and so forth. What we want to do is, and the reason for this, I should say, is simply because we're so hardwired to absorb or digest visuals, what we see differently, it affects us emotionally. It actually affects us on a deeper level than simply text. So, for example, if I were to show a picture of a baby versus say the word baby, we would have a very different reaction if we hooked up our brains to an fMRI. We're affected intrinsically at a deeper level. It affects our rational thinking. It affects decision making. It affects understanding and learning. For example, a good friend of mine, Rob Branson, was a Toastmasters member. And so he conducted, which I love, but I love experimentation. It's one thing to say something works, it's another thing to prove it. So he conducted an informal experiment where he tried to find out how people remember things. So what he did was he told a story, a news story. And what he did on one piece of information was he simply said it once. And then he, on the rest of the information, he tried different mechanisms or ways to help you remember. And the second was reinforcing it by repetition, by simply saying something over and over again. 26 million. 26 million! Can you believe that? 26 million. And then he used visuals. So afterwards, he did a test. He handed out a piece of paper and he asked people what they remembered. And what he found was that when he mentioned the information only once, 26% of the group remembered the information. When he repeated it, 36, or I should say 34% remembered it. And then when he used a visual, 86% of the people remembered it.
Wow.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, it's sort of interesting because one of the things that if you watch commercials on TV, what do? They have images or video, and then they'll say something like, call 1-800-555-5555. That's 1-800-555-5555, 1-800-555-5555. And you keep going, why are they repeating it 3 times? But like you said, that's the magic number where the brain remembers. It's really fascinating. And really that is a behavioral psychology thing where you're looking at how people remember not only visually, but auditorily. So you're combining the visual, the auditory, and that repetition, which if you're fairly bright, that probably irritates you. But for a lot of people, you need that third repetition to just get it in there. You know, call 1-800 lose weight. Call 1-800 lose weight, and they just keep saying it over and over again. And then you catch yourself sometime later in the day going, call 1-800 lose weight. I need to call 1-800 lose weight. I'm fat. That's the real problem. And of course, then you run into all sorts of other issues. But
and the real Rick is back.
But seriously, it's interesting. And have they done studies on, aside from the visual impact, but have they done studies on how we process information visually? Well, our brains are pattern recognition machines, but on graphics and the kind of graphics that really get us going. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, yes, there's a lot of, it applies much like what you said, the auditory, the visual, all the senses, tactile, they come together. And the more we can touch, the better we will be at influencing or motivating or helping people adopt and remember and absorb the information. There has been a lot of research on how our brain weighs and remembers and adopts information. Repetition, exposure, repeated exposure is a great way to do that. And how we can leverage that visually or with visual communication would be to show something that we are familiar with, because familiarity actually breeds trust. I know there's an old saying, familiarity breeds contempt, but in our issue, familiarity actually breeds trust. That when we look at brain scans, when humans are exposed to the same information or the same visuals over and over again, good things happen. So, for example, I was giving a presentation, or at least I helped create a presentation for the military. It was the U.S. military, and we were trying to help the U.S. Army adopt a new solution that would save them money, save lives. And so one of the I say this tricks, and it sounds like it's manipulation, but it's not. It's how our brain works, and we want every advantage possible when helping others achieve their goals. So what we did was we showed the general. We received permission to show an image of the general walking on the base with his son. So in the presentation, we actually showed that image, which we got permission to do. And as soon as that image came up, the general jumped up and said, "That's my boy." He was so happy. "That's my boy. He's so proud." And so that affected him emotionally, positively, which made him, which predisposed him to be more accepting and trusting of the information that was shared with him after that. That's one of the many, many examples of how visual communication, or the research around communication in general, can be applied to visual communication and then increase the odds that we'll be able to achieve our goals using just that.
Well, and there is a fair amount of research out there that says if we have more than one way to connect the information inside of our brain, then we'll recall it faster and we'll retain the information longer. So it all kind of fits, doesn't it? Whether we're talking marketing strategy or we're talking visual art of some sort.
Exactly, Dawn. That's exactly it. I wish it was the case that graphics or visual communication was a silver bullet. No, it works together with textual, auditory, and so forth to help us remember the information. However, each one of the senses has a different benefit. For example, science has shown us that visuals tend to jump right past the short-term memory gatekeeper, whereas text is decoded linearly. The quick brown fox jumped over, so we're decoding it linearly, which means that it's taking us more time to take it in, which means that it engages our short-term memory, which means we're the information is more easily forgotten. So if we are exposed to a visual, the information, the way our brain works, is it absorbs all of it at one time, and then it decides what is important. A neat little fact that I learned, what science is telling us now, is that have you ever walked into a room and instantly forgotten what you walked into the room for?
Senior moments, yes, I have them.
Exactly.
Well, actually, we're not even sure why we're here today. Dawn and I always forget.
Well, senior moments aren't so senior after all. What they are finding is that our brains are structured so that when we walk into a room, we immediately purge the short-term memory, or usually purge the short-term memory long enough to absorb the entire environment and then go back to what we were doing. The reason for this is because when we enter a new room, a new environment, there could be a new threat. So our brain says, let's take the entire room in. This is what we should do. We don't always do it, but this is what we should do. Take the entire room in, consciously or subconsciously, and then go back to what we were doing, which, as I said, purges the short-term memory. So what science has taught us, again, is that walk back through the threshold and it re-engages the short-term memory as long as it hasn't been too long. That's amazing. I mean, that is spectacular. And we can use that in training, education, sales, communication in general. It's a fantastic study. and it's applicable to just about anything that we do.
You know, that's fascinating. I remember once I was in my early 30s and I got into an elevator in one of the buildings I worked in and got off on the floor. I got out of the elevator. My reference wasn't right. I go, what floor am I on? It's, you know, I was expecting to see something. It was totally brain conditioning at that moment. And literally, I was totally thrown off. I'm looking, and I go, I don't know what floor I'm on. I got back in the elevator, went down, came back up. It was fine. But that's exactly what you're talking about, how that it needed a reset because for some odd reason, I was focused on seeing something that wasn't there, at least from the angle I came out on. And it was an interesting experiment. Never did that again. But at that moment, I went, that was really bad. That was mechanical behavior at its worst. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. One of the most fascinating things I've learned recently was the power of what science is terming intrinsic thinking versus extrinsic thinking, basically conscious versus subconscious. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been driving in a car and suddenly kind of woke up, quote unquote, and realized, I don't remember driving the last 4 or 5 miles.
Yeah.
But you still got there, you didn't get into a car accident. But what science is telling us is that our intrinsic mind is far, far more powerful. I can't remember the data, so I don't want to misquote it, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 86,000 to 86 million more thoughts are processed intrinsically than extrinsically, meaning that our subconscious mind is doing way more things than we can imagine. It's an amazing supercomputer. And that when we make decisions, we're basing them off of this intrinsic or emotional or subconscious thinking, and it's actually smarter than our conscious mind. We did an experiment where we frequently do it in my training, where we ask people to show the class how to change lanes from the center lane to the left lane. And of course, mostly everyone drove there or drives. And every single time to date, they have it wrong. They get it wrong. They cannot explain how to do it. They just do it intrinsically, much like driving and forgetting how we got there. We did it with our internal engine, our internal computer. And tapping into that is so very important. We're going to learn more and more that tapping into that intrinsic thinking is going to trump every other type of communication.
Now, a lot of people say that when we do drive, and we are, like you said, driving intrinsically, we actually drive better. Have you read that?
Yes, sir, I do. As a matter of fact, there was an experiment done helping people choose a car, to buy a car. One group was asked to pick a car from a list. You know, they had some images, little bit of explanation, this is the Honda Civic, etc. Another group was asked to pick a car. Oh, and then this group was told to go play a game. Another group was asked to pick a car and given volumes of information about each car from which to sift and learn and educate themselves. And they found that the groups with more information made worse decisions than the group that had less information because they were using or relying on their intrinsic thinking to make the decision. That is incredible.
Yeah.
It feels funny to think that we have all this education information at our fingertips, and yet it's our muscle memory, our reptilian brain, and so forth that are guiding our decisions. On that score, what about color? Let's talk about color and its impact.
Well, color is a big deal because it is the very first thing that human beings see when they look at anything. Color actually has an emotional impact on us. For example, if we were to paint the color of the room that we are in right now red, we would have we would actually have a physical reaction. Our pulse rate would go up, we may perspire, our pupils would change, the dilation on our pupils would change because color has an emotional response. And that is key when we're applying it to our materials. Our learning materials or our materials for sales and marketing and so forth. It's very, very important because that color will elicit a very specific emotion, and it's culturally dependent. For example, red is the color of, I believe, mourning in some South African countries, where in the United States, for example, black is the color of mourning. To know the meaning of the color within the culture is very important as well.
Red is the color of weddings in China. So yeah, to the point, it matters. And then what about without being gender biased, there's a large percentage of the male population is colorblind. That's a fact.
Yeah, about 50%.
So what do we do to have our same impact, but not go with colors that are most often affected by colorblind?
Yeah, well, what I do is I take a look at what is the percentage of males, typically males, that are colorblind in a specific area. For example, it's typically complementary colors that are across from one another on the color wheel. So, for example, red-green or purple-yellow. Red-green is, I believe, more pervasive, or a higher percentage of people are red-green colorblind. So I typically don't rely on those.
So just leave them out and just use them for highlight, maybe?
Yes, exactly. In which case, these people, what they're seeing are color is broken into hue, saturation, and value. Hue is where it appears on the rainbow. Is it yellow? Is it blue? Saturation is how intense or vibrant the color is. Is it neon or is it pastel? And then value is how light or dark the color is. So when we have a colorblind individual, they're processing it based on value, how light or dark it is. So what we want to do is, when we're communicating with color, we want to make sure that when we look at what they see, the colorblind people, we rely on the value. So switch your graphic to grayscale, print it in grayscale, view it in grayscale, and you'll notice that it is light or darkness that the colorblind individual sees, and so rely on the value of the color to communicate the information, and be sure to provide a key if relevant.
I've known about this red-green thing for a long time and avoid them, but I hadn't really thought about doing just what you suggested. So cool. I learned something more today. That's great.
And you know what, Mike? We are out of time, but we'd love to have you back.
Yeah.
We're only touching the surface of this, and this is really fascinating.
Brain research is fascinating, and that's why all of us do what we do, right? I think.
What do we do, Dawn?
What do we do? Well, as little as possible. No, I'm kidding. I get ready to go back deep under on design. But yeah, Mike, we'd love to have you back. And I want to mention, too, that we found out yesterday that Mike's going to have a booth and do a pre-conference at ASTD International Conference this year. So that's pretty exciting. So any of our listeners that are going to be at ICE, as we call it, can stop by and say hello to Mike there. I'll be doing that. For sure.
That sounds great. Mike, any other place you're going to be? Any webinars, anything else you're doing?
Gosh, put me on the spot. I can't remember. Yes, my schedule's pretty full, but at the top of my head, there's Association of Proposal Management Professional Conferences, Presentation Summit. Hopefully, I'm going to be at that this year. I'm drawing a blank, but yes, I'll be around. If you check, there's a website you can go to, billiondollargraphics.com. If you go there, we try to keep it up to date with my speaking engagements. Alternatively, there's another website. Too many websites. Sorry, guys. 24hrco.com, which is short for 24-hour company. Go there, and some of my speaking engagements are there as well. I'm all over the place.
He is all over. We were lucky to get him this date. Yeah. Busy man. Lots going on, and it's all exciting, interesting stuff. So I'm glad to make your acquaintance a year plus ago and glad to call you a friend now.
Absolutely, Dawn.
Well, great. Well, Mike, we appreciate you having you on. And Dawn, as always, we will see you next week.
Yep, we have a show next week, so stay tuned.
Sounds good.
I think we have it nailed, but I don't want to make an announcement yet.
Okay, great. And I will be at ASTD Tech Knowledge next week, so if anybody wants to get together, talk business, talk e-learning, talk whatever, give me a call, send me a message, and let's coordinate.
And I don't think they even have to look for you in the casino, right?
I'm not a gambler, so no, I don't like to smoke. It drives me nuts. I don't even like Vegas, so what can I say?
Well, you'll have to say hello and give hugs to all my friends out there because I will not be there. I'll be here.
Okay, sounds good. And so we are now going to wrap up this show, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for being there. If you're watching the show, please subscribe. If you're live, hey, thanks for being there. We really appreciate it. And by the way, we didn't have any audience comments today.
Oh, well, I was asking some questions when I got back in that were out there. But, yeah, they're enjoying it. enjoyed it a lot.
All right. Well, have a good one, everyone, and we will see you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are wrapped up with this show.